They laughed when the waitress fell. Then the Mafia boss called in 14 black SUVs. The Blue Comet Diner is a fishbowl of fluorescent light marooned in the midnight ink of Halcyon Bay. It smells like old coffee and frying onions, a perfume I wear in my hair and under my fingernails. It is a 24/7 purgatory, and I am Lena Mirek, professional ghost in a cheap blue apron. My shift was 3 hours from ending, but it felt like a lifetime. The vinyl booths were sticky, a group of junior finance types, all sloppy ties and alcohol-fueled bravado, had been riding me for an hour. They were loud, entitled, and a permanent fixture of the late-night rot. I was balancing a heavy oval tray, 4 cheeseburger deluxes, 4 Cokes, a side of rings when my foot hit the slick. My old boss, Sal, never bothered to fix the leaky gasket on the dishwasher. A patch of greasy water, invisible under the humming lights, was always there. My ankle went first, the tray tilted for one agonizing, suspended second. I tried to save it, then gravity won. I hit the checkered linoleum with a sickening thud that knocked the air from my lungs. Plates shattered, ice and soda exploded across the floor. The sound was a bomb going off in the quiet diner. But the silence that followed was worse. It lasted maybe 2 seconds, then the laughter started. It was not a chuckle. It was a full-throated, braying roar from the finance booth. One of them, the one with the expensive watch, was already pointing his phone at me. The red light was on. He was recording. "That's a 10. Boy's perfect landing. Clean up on aisle 3 and bring her a mop." My face burned. It was a heat that started in my chest and flooded my skin until I was sure I was glowing red. I was on my hands and knees, soda soaking through the denim of my jeans, shards of ceramic biting into my palms. I could feel the sharp sting of tears, but I refused to let them fall. Humiliation is a kind of pain that paralyzes. Then the laughter cut off. Not gradually. It stopped, sliced clean in half. From the corner booth, the one that faces the door, a man stood up. I had barely registered him when he came in. He was alone, which is rare this late. He wore a black suit that cost more than my entire apartment. He'd been drinking black coffee and reading a physical newspaper. Not a phone. Now. He placed his linen napkin gently on the table, as if finishing a pleasant meal. He was tall, and the cheap lights seemed to warp around him, sinking into the dark wool of his suit. His eyes, even from across the room, looked like cold charcoal. This was Domenico Fazzari. I did not know his name then, but I knew his type. He was the kind of man who owns the shadows the Blue Comet tries to keep out. He did not look at me. He looked at the booth of laughing men. As he stood, the plate glass window in the front of the diner began to vibrate. It was a low, powerful hum, like a distant earthquake. I looked past the neon Blue Comet sign burning backwards on the glass. The street, empty a moment ago, was full. 14 black SUVs, identical, silent, had pulled up to the curb. They lined the entire block, their engines idling in perfect, threatening unison. The amber glow of their turn signals began to blink, one after another, a synchronized, silent signal. The air in the diner turned to solid ice. The man with the phone slowly lowered it. Domenico Fazzari finally spoke. His voice was not loud. It was a low, resonant gravel that cut through the smell of grease and bleach. "Apologize to her, now." It was not a request. The man with the watch, still drunk enough to be stupid, scoffed. "Hey, pal, relax. It was just a joke. She slipped. Funny stuff. Right." Domenico did not move. He simply tilted his head, a gesture so slight it was barely perceptible. One of the men sitting with him, who I had assumed was just another customer, stood. This man was built like a refrigerator. He walked over to me, past the shattered plates. He did not offer me a hand. Instead, he bent down, gathered my fallen tray, and placed it on the nearest clean table. Then he reached into his own pocket, pulled out a thick clip of bills, and counted out several notes. He laid them flat next to the tray. It was enough to cover my wages for a week, maybe more. Domenico's gaze drifted from the loudmouth to the phone still clutched in his hand. His own hand, long-fingered and clean, rested on his table. His index finger began to tap, a slow, deliberate rhythm against the formica. 1, 2, 3, a beat of judgment. My hip throbbed, my palms were stinging, but the shame was burning hotter. It was the shame of being helpless, of being filmed, of being laughed at, and now, of being saved by a man who looked like he could order the city to burn. I pushed myself up onto my elbows, my muscles screaming. "I can get up myself," I whispered, but the words came out sharp, cutting through the heavy silence. I grabbed the edge of the table and hauled myself to my feet. Ignoring the throbbing pain in my knee, I grabbed my tray. I looked at the money, then at Domenico. He was watching me now, those cold eyes assessing. He gave another, smaller nod. The refrigerator-sized man turned to the booth of suits. "You were invited to leave." The finance bros scrambled. They fumbled for their wallets, throwing cash onto the table, tripping over each other to get to the door. 2 more men in dark suits had entered the diner, holding the door open. As the men passed, they were stopped. "The phones," one of the new men said. In front of me, in the middle of the diner, the suits were forced to unlock their phones. The videos were found. The delete button was pressed. The recently deleted folder was emptied. Only when my humiliation was digitally erased did the men get to leave, scurrying into the night like rats. The SUVs waited, their engines still a low growl. Domenico Fazzari walked to the counter. He left cash for his coffee. He did not look at me again, but he gave me a slight, sharp nod as he passed. Then he was gone. The engines roared to life, and in 30 seconds, the street was empty again. The silence that fell back into the blue comet was heavier than before. I limped back behind the counter, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the rag I grabbed to wipe my hands. That is when I saw it. Tucked just under the register, where only I would find it, was a plain white envelope. My name was not on it. Inside was an invoice from the Halcyon Bay Gas and Electric Company. It was for the emergency repair of the diner's main gas range, a repair Sal had been putting off for 6 months. The bill was enormous. Across the bottom, in red ink, was a stamp paid in full. Beneath the invoice was a small, thick piece of cardstock. A note was written on it in strong, black ink. Just 6 words. "Don't let them teach you shame." I clutched the note, the sharp edges of the card pressing into my bleeding palm. I walked to the front window. The first hard rain of the season had begun to fall, washing the grime from the streets, high above the streetlights, far above the escaping steam from the manholes. A small red light blinked. It was a drone, hovering like a mechanical insect over the wet pavement, its lens pointed down, silently recording the empty street where 14 SUVs had just been. The walk home from the Blue Comet is always a penance. The air off the bay is thick and wet, smelling of salt and diesel. My apartment in Harborview is a 5th-floor walk-up. The 5 flights of stairs are a special kind of hell when your knee is swelling to the size of a grapefruit and your palms are slick with half-dried blood. The building smells like boiled cabbage and damp plaster. My apartment is a shoebox with a view of a brick wall. The window in the main room is painted shut, and a constellation of black mold is creeping out from the sill. It is home. I clicked on the single lamp, which cast a weak, yellow circle. I sat on the edge of my mattress, which is also my couch, and peeled off my ruined jeans. The diner's cheap first aid kit was under the sink. I cleaned the cuts on my hands with antiseptic that stung like fire, then taped 3 butterfly bandages across my knee. The skin was already turning a dark, mottled purple. I sat there for a minute, the note from the envelope still in my good hand. "Don't let them teach you shame." It was easy for him to say. He was the one who drove away in a car worth more than my life, leaving a week's wages as a tip. I tossed the card onto my nightstand. My laptop was ancient, a dinosaur with a cracked screen that took 10 minutes to boot up. While it groaned and whirred, I stared at the application portal on the screen. Halcyon Bay Community College, certificate program in sound design. It was my one-way ticket out of the grease trap. I just had to finish the application essay. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but the words would not come. All I could think about was the sound of those plates shattering, the burst of male laughter. The laptop screen flickered, and for a second, my reflection stared back at me. Tired eyes, cheap haircut, an old intern ID hanging from the lamp. The past came rushing back in, uninvited. It always does in the small hours. I used to be someone else. I was the intern at Signal and Stone, an indie label that was all vinyl and vintage amps. I was the one who could hear the difference between a new pressing and a 70s original. I was good. I was going to be a sound engineer. Then I heard something I was not supposed to. A conversation in a studio, not meant for my ears. A city official from the Municipal Communications Bureau, the MCB. They control every performance license, every public address system permit, every decibel of sound in Halcyon Bay. And this official was taking cash to deny permits to small clubs, clearing the way for bigger corporate venues. I recorded it. I was 21 and stupid. I thought you handed evidence to the right people and justice just happened. I filed a complaint. The MCB opened an investigation into me. They countersued. Bizarre, baffling charges. Unauthorized recording of municipal airspace. Slander via acoustic trespass. My lawyer, a public defender who looked as tired as I felt, told me to plead it out. I lost my internship. I lost my scholarship. I ended up at the Blue Comet. The MCB taught me all about shame. Long before those finance bros did. My phone buzzed on the table, vibrating against the laptop, a text from an unknown number. My stomach hollowed out. The message was simple. Tonight's clip is worth money. Want to be famous? Below it was a link. My fingers were numb as I clicked it. It led to a dark web video hosting site. The title was Drunk Waitress Eats It. And there I was, in grainy, pixelated glory, my feet flying out from under me. The fall, the shatter, the laughter was the loudest part of the audio mix. But the video did not stop there. It kept rolling. It showed the diner going quiet. It showed Domenico Fazzari standing up. It zoomed in on his face, cold and unmoving, and then, through the window, it captured the impossible, terrifying arrival of 14 identical black SUVs. I slammed the laptop shut. My heart was hammering against my ribs. They had not just filmed me. They had filmed him. I grabbed my phone. My first instinct to call the police, to report the video. I opened my banking app to see if I had enough credit to pay my phone bill. The screen flashed red, negative $37.14. A check for my electric bill had bounced. The overdraft fee was $25. I was not just broke, I was drowning. As if summoned, my email pinged, a new message from Harborview Property Management. Dear resident, it began. In light of the exciting new tidal front revitalization project and the corresponding increase in property values, your rent will be increasing by 20%, effective the 1st of next month. 20%, that was a death sentence. I clicked the link in the email. New title front. A slick corporate video popped up. The mayor, his face shiny with false sincerity, stood at a podium overlooking the bay. A new dawn for Halcyon Bay, Tierney boomed, a place for commerce, for luxury, for life. Behind him, a banner listed the primary investors. The biggest logo, sleek and predatory, was Komodo Developments. I had never heard of them. The camera panned over the other investors. They called themselves the North Harbor Round Table, a collection of old money shadows and new money sharks. The local news feed auto-played in the sidebar. A different story. A grainy photo of a warehouse fire down at the docks. The anchor was talking about ongoing logistics disputes. For a split second, a face flashed on the screen. It was him, Domenico Fazzari. The caption underneath read, Domenico Fazzari, CEO of Orion Logistics. The video ended. Logistics. That was a clean, sterile word for whatever he did. My phone buzzed again, but this time it was a call. Jules. My only friend in this city. I let it ring twice before picking up. "Lena, you okay? I heard Sal was screaming about a bunch of broken plates." "Hey, Jules, long night. I'm fine." "Yeah, well, be careful getting home," and he said. His voice was tight, worried. "Jules runs a taco truck, the Wandering Tortilla, and he knows the streets better than anyone. There's a new crew out tonight, not the usual muscle. These guys are organized. They're hitting up all the small businesses, offering protection for the new project." My blood ran cold. The new Title Front project. That's the one. They told me I have a week to move my truck, or they'll relocate it for me. These guys are clearing the board. Lena, for Komodo. Before I could answer, my phone's call waiting beeped, a blocked number. "Jules, hold on." I clicked over. Silence. Just the dead, heavy air of an open line. "Hello," I said. A click, a synthesized voice, flat and metallic, spoke one sentence: "Don't fight the new Title Front." Then the line went dead. I hung up, my hand shaking. I stumbled to the window, pulling at the stuck frame. It would not budge. I felt trapped, watched. I was halfway to the door to wedge a chair under the knob when I heard a soft thud from the hallway, down by the mailboxes. I waited, listening. Nothing, just the building's usual groans. I crept down the 5 flights of stairs, the bare bulb on the landing flickering. On the grimy tile of the lobby, just below my mailbox, sat a package. It was not a box. It was wrapped in thick, rough-spun canvas, tied with simple twine, no name, no address. I took it back upstairs, my heart a cold knot in my chest. I sat on my floor and unwrapped it. Inside was a machine. It was old, but flawless, a vintage, portable reel-to-reel tape recorder. It was beautiful. All brushed steel and heavy knobs, the kind I had only seen in pictures of old recording studios. It had been perfectly restored. Tucked into the lid was a note, the same thick cardstock as before, the same strong, black ink. "So you remember sound is also a weapon." A reel of tape was already threaded through the machine. I stared at it, my fingers tracing the cold metal. With a click, I pressed the play button. First, there was just the warm, analog hiss of the tape. It was a sound I had always loved, the sound of potential. Then, a voice. It was a whisper, deep, calm, and familiar, the same gravel and steel voice from the diner. It sounded like he was speaking directly into my ear. "When they laugh," Domenico Fazzari whispered, "stand tall." The next night, I went back to the Blue Comet. I was not working. Sal, mystified by the sudden generosity of an anonymous donor who paid for his gas repairs, had given me the week off. I sat in the corner booth, the one Domenico Fazzari had occupied. It had the best view of the street. I was nursing a lukewarm coffee, waiting. When you are as jumpy as I was, paranoia and intuition feel like the same thing. He showed up just after midnight. He did not come inside. He was dressed in a heavy coat, too warm for the season, and a baseball cap pulled low, hiding his face. He was sloppy. A bright blue laminate ID card, bearing the sleek Komodo Developments logo, was clipped to his jacket. He was taking pictures with his phone, not of the diner's architecture, but of the inside. He zoomed in on Sal, wiping the counter. He took a long shot of Maria, the other night shift waitress. He was cataloging the staff. I slid the vintage tape recorder from my backpack. The metal was cool and reassuring against my palms. I set it on the table, aimed the small, powerful external microphone toward the front door, and pressed the record button. The reels turned, perfectly silent. The man on the sidewalk was muttering, his voice muffled by the glass. He was on a call. I leaned closer, my ear near the gap in the door frame. Asset damage is high," he was saying. "The old man, yeah, Sal, Maria, and the girl, Marek, she's the liability. The boss wants the Blue Comet handled." My breath caught. A liability. Then, cutting through the night air from the south, came the sound. A long, mournful blast from a freight train whistle. I knew that whistle. It was the 1:17 a.m. express, and there was only one place in the city where it echoed like that, bouncing off high metal walls, the sea-glass container yard. The sound was a perfect acoustic fingerprint. I clicked the stop button. My phone vibrated, a text from Jules. My stomach tightened. I called him. "Lena, they came back," he said, his voice tight with panic. "The Komodo goons, they gave me my final notice. 48 hours. Move the truck, or they relocate it." "Jules, no." "They offered me $5,000 for it," he choked out. $5,000. That truck is worth 50. Lena, it's my whole life. What am I supposed to do? My anger, which had been a low simmer, flashed into a white-hot rage. This was not about a fall anymore. This was not about a rude customer. This was about Jules, and my rent hike, and the MCB, and the web of shadows strangling Harborview. Komodo was the hand, but I knew Varys Hale and the MCB were the ones signing the permits. I had to link them. The sea-glass yard was 3 miles of rust-colored steel and deep shadows, pressed against the black water of the bay. The main gate was lit like a prison, but the south fence was dark. I got in the same way I used to sneak into sold-out concerts, find the gap in the security patrol's sweep. I held the tape recorder in my hand. I was not Lena, the clumsy waitress. I was Lena, the sound engineer. And this was my weapon. I moved between the towering stacks of shipping containers, metal canyons that groaned and popped in the damp night air. I followed the sounds, not the loud clang of the cranes, but the quiet human sounds. Near Pier 4, I heard voices. They were coming from an open container, set up as a makeshift office. I crept closer, crouching behind a stack of empty chemical barrels. I switched the recorder on, the reels turning in the dark. 2 men, expensive suits, smoking cigars that smelled like burnt money. "The Harborview tenants are getting loud," one voice said, smooth and educated. "The press is sniffing around." "They'll be silent soon enough," said the other. "Varys Hale at the MCB is starting the public pressure cooker phase tomorrow. A wave of new noise complaints, sudden building code violations, health hazards, will condemn the whole block by the 1st of the month." Varys Hale. The name hit me like a physical blow. The man who had derailed my entire life. The first man chuckled. "And the holdouts, the taco truck, the diner. That's what forced planning is for," the second man said, his voice dropping. "A few small, accidental fires, a coincidental water main break. They'll be begging Komodo to buy them out for pennies on the dollar." I must have flinched. My foot scraped against a loose piece of gravel. The sound was tiny, but in the quiet of the yard, it was like a gunshot. The voices stopped. "Who's there?" I did not wait to answer. I ran. A blinding white beam of light slammed into me, a security floodlight mounted on a pole, snapped on, tracking me. An alarm blared, a deafening, pulsing klaxon that echoed off the metal. "Intruder on Pier 4. Intruder on Pier 4. I sprinted toward the water, the only direction that was not fenced in. I was on a long, dark wooden pier, the planks slick with seawater and moss. I could hear them behind me, heavy boots slamming the wood. They were fast. I pushed harder, my lungs burning, my bad ankle, the one I heard at the diner, screamed in protest. I slipped. My foot went out from under me on a patch of wet moss. It was the blue comet all over again. Time stretched. I saw my hand lose its grip on the recorder. I saw the black, churning water between the pier and the massive hull of a container ship. I was falling. A hand shot out of the darkness and clamped around my upper arm. It was not a gentle catch. It was a steel trap. It stopped my fall so violently my shoulder socket screamed, and I was left dangling for one heart-stopping second, my feet swinging over the void. Then he hauled me back, pulling me up as if I weighed nothing. He did not just pull me to safety, he spun me around and slammed me hard against the corrugated metal wall of a container, his body pinning me there. I gasped, the air knocked out of me. Domenico Fazzari. He was not in a suit, and he was dressed for the docks. in dark jeans and a black Henley that stretched across his shoulders. He looked like a panther, all coiled muscle and shadow. His face was inches from mine, and his eyes were not cold. They were on fire. The alarm suddenly stopped. The floodlights snapped off. The sound of the running footsteps behind me ceased. He had shut down the entire yard with his presence. He did not yell. His voice was a low, intense growl, barely louder than the lapping water. "Who are you hunting?" "Lena." I was shaking, soaked in sweat and sea spray, but my voice was pure ice. Not who, what, I'm hunting the truth. A flicker of something surprise, maybe even respect, moved in his eyes. He looked me up and down, a quick, assessing glance at the tape recorder still clutched in my other hand. "The truth won't save you out here," he said, his voice flat. "It will get you killed." "I don't like being saved," I shot back, trying to shove him off me. He did not budge. His grip on my arm tightened, just enough to make his point. "No," he said, his voice quiet and final. I noticed. He let me go. He stepped back, giving me air. "My men will see you home. I can walk." "They are not asking." A matte black SUV, the same model as the ones from the diner, rolled onto the pier, its headlights off. The passenger door opened. He walked me to it, a hand at the small of my back, not touching me, but guiding me with his proximity. Before I got in, he pressed something small and heavy into my hand. I looked down. It was a business card, made of thick black metal. There was no name, just a phone number etched in silver. "When you need a civilized conversation, Fleur," he said, "call that number. No apologies necessary." I got in. The man who looked like a refrigerator was driving. The ride was silent, the engine a low purr. He did not take me to my apartment. He dropped me at the curb near the Blue Comet, a smart precaution. I walked the 6 blocks home, my mind racing. I pulled out my own phone to check the time. It was almost 3 a.m. The screen was black. I pressed the power button. Nothing. That was impossible. It had been at 90% when I left. I stopped under a flickering streetlight. I ripped the back cover off the cheap phone. The battery was in place. The SIM card was warm to the touch, too warm. And tucked into the plastic casing just beside it, so small I almost missed it, was a microdot of black plastic that did not belong there. A bug. My blood ran cold. They were not just watching me. They were listening. Komodo, the MCB, or him. I did not go home. I walked to the nearest storm drain. I pulled the SIM card and the bug from the phone. I placed them on the iron grate and ground them into plastic dust with the heel of my boot. I kicked the remains into the sewer. I looked up. On the light pole above me, a municipal security camera, its red recording light glowing, swiveled slowly to track me as I walked away. My apartment felt wrong, violated. I locked the door and jammed my only chair under the knob. I went to the window, the one painted shut, and looked out at the familiar blank brick wall of the building across the alley. And I saw it. A small, perfect circle of red light. It was on the brick, an inch from the window frame. I froze, my heart stopping. The red dot moved. It crawled across the glass, across my cheap curtain. It settled on my chest, directly over my heart. I did not breathe. I did not move. I just watched it, a tiny, lethal star. It stayed there for 1 second, 2, a lifetime. Then, as silently as it had appeared, it winked out. I used the black metal card. I waited until the next day, until my nerves had settled from the laser sight, and dialed the number etched in silver. A voice answered on the first ring. It was not his. It was clipped, professional, and had no inflection. "Yes. I'm calling for Mr. Fazari. My name is Lena." "The Pale Koi Tea House, 10 p.m. Come alone." The line clicked dead. The Pale Koi was not in my neighborhood. It was in the old quarter, where the streets were narrow and paved with original brick, slick with a persistent dampness. The shop was a single door, marked only by a small, carved wooden fish. It was a world away from the Blue Comet's neon. I pushed the door open. The air inside was warm and smelled of dried flowers and cedar. It was silent. A man in a simple black shirt bowed, but it was not Domenico. He gestured to a private room at the back. Domenico was there, sitting on a low cushion at a dark wooden table. The room was empty otherwise. His guards, including the refrigerator-sized man from the diner, were visible through the rice paper screen. Standing outside in the alley, they were present, but they were not invited. He was honoring the civilized conversation. He was not in a suit. He wore a dark gray cashmere sweater and dark trousers. His sleeves were pushed up to his elbows. He looked younger without the armor of his suit, but no less dangerous. He was in the middle of a complex ritual involving a tiny clay pot and several small porcelain cups. He was rinsing tea leaves with hot water, his movements precise and economical. As he poured the steaming water, I saw it. On the pale skin of his right forearm, running from his wrist to his elbow, was a long, jagged scar. It was not a clean surgical line. It was old, white, and puckered, the kind of mark left by a severe burn, or a blade that had been twisted. It was the mark of someone who had not just given orders, but had survived something terrible. He gestured for me to sit. I folded my legs awkwardly onto the cushion opposite him. He poured the pale, fragrant oolong into a cup the size of a thimble and pushed it across the table to me. He did not speak. I did not touch the tea. "A red dot," I said, my voice tight. "On my apartment, on my chest." He did not look up from the tea. "They're sloppy," he said. "Komodo. They wanted to see if you would run. You did not. That is good. It means they underestimate you." "Was it you at Seaglass?" "I was there for my own business," the tea said, finally meeting my gaze. "You were an unexpected complication. You are loud, Lena. And you sent me a tape recorder." "I did." He pushed a simple manila folder across the table. It landed softly next to my teacup. "And I brought you this." I opened it. It was not a vague threat. It was a blueprint of the entire conspiracy. Leaked internal bank statements, wire transfer receipts, offshore account numbers. It was all there. Pages of it. Director Varys Hale of the Municipal Communications Bureau, my old nemesis, receiving monthly deposits from a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands. The shell corporation's listed director was a name I did not know, but the corporate address was the same high-rise as Komodo Developments. The transfers were marked consulting fees. One, from 3 weeks ago, for $50,000, had a memo, Harborview Acoustic Compliance. It was the proof, the smoking gun, the link between the corrupt city official and the predatory developers. I looked up from the pages, my heart hammering. Why are you giving me this?" He took a slow sip of his tea, his eyes holding mine over the rim of the tiny cup. "Because that night," he said, his voice a low rumble, "you said, 'I can get up myself.'" I waited. That was not a complete answer. "You fell," he continued, placing the cup down with a faint click. "They laughed. They recorded you. They tried to strip you of your dignity, and you got up. You looked me in the eye and refused my man's help. People who get up are rare. People who get up when they're drowning, when the world is laughing. They are useful." "Useful," I repeated. The word felt cold. "Komodo is bad for my business," he said flatly. "They are loud, like you. They draw the wrong kind of attention. They bring federal heat to my docks. You want Varys Hale. I want Komodo crippled. Our interests align." I leaned forward. This was the moment. "So, what's the deal?" "Simple." He refilled my cup, though I had not touched it. "You have the audio you recorded at Seaglass, the public pressure cooker and forced planning. You have your old grievance with the MCB. Now, you have this." He tapped the folder. "You use them. You expose Varys Hale. You link him to Komodo. You use your skills. Sound, you cut the head off the snake. And you, I am a ghost. The Orion Syndicate does not exist in your story. This folder came from an anonymous source. A concerned citizen. You never saw me. And you stay out of my life," I added, my voice harder than I intended. "And out of Jules Ortega's. The food truck, Komodo, is trying to run him out." His expression did not change, but a flicker of something passed through his eyes. "The truck will be fine. I have no interest in your life, Lena. Only your objective." He paused. "Komodo? They're involved in things I do not permit in my territory." "Your territory." "The docks, the shipping, the logistics. Orion controls the harbor. We keep things orderly. But we have lines." He leaned forward, his voice dropping, the intensity pulling the air from the room. "No drugs, no trafficking, ever. Varys, Hale, and Komodo. They do not have lines. They just have an appetite. I am not a saint, Lena. I am not a good man. But I am not them." The fragile piece of the tea house shattered. The bell on the front door jangled aggressively. 4 men, loud and drunk, pushed into the shop. They were not here for tea. They wore expensive tracksuits and heavy gold. One of them, the leader, had a bright blue Komodo logo on the breast of his jacket. "They saw us in the back room. They recognized Domenico." The leader's drunken smirk faltered, replaced by a confused arrogance. "Hey, Fazzari," the man slurred. "This ain't your side of the bay. We heard you were—" Domenico did not move. He did not reach for a weapon. He did not glance at his men waiting in the alley. He simply lifted his eyes from his teacup. He looked at the man. It was not a glare. It was not anger. It was a look of complete, profound, and final emptiness. It was the gaze of a man looking at something that had already ceased to exist. It held no heat, no emotion. It was the absolute, silent zero of power. The man stopped talking. His mouth hung open. The blood drained from his face. He looked at his friends, who were already backing toward the door. He mumbled something, an apology, and then he and his crew scrambled to get out, the bell jangling pathetically in their wake. Domenico returned his gaze to his tea, as if he had just been interrupted by a mild breeze. My heart was beating in my throat. I had seen violence. I had seen threats. But I had never seen that. I realized, in that moment, that silent power, the power that needs no weapon, is the most terrifying thing in the world. The meeting was over. We stood on the brick sidewalk outside. The drizzle had turned into a light, cold rain. I clutched the folder under my thin jacket, the damp seeping into my shirt. I was shivering. He shrugged off his heavy, black wool overcoat. It looked like it cost more than my car. If I had one. He held it out to me. I shook my head. "I'm fine." "You're shivering," he stated, as if observing a fact of nature. He stepped closer, not to force it on me, but to hold it open. He was waiting for my consent. He would not touch me. I turned slightly, letting my pride break just enough to slide my arms in. The coat was huge, enveloping me. It was incredibly warm. As I pulled the lapels together, my hand brushed his. Our fingers were a half-inch apart, suspended in the cold night air. I could feel the heat radiating from his skin. It was not just the coat. The air between us crackled, a static charge that had nothing to do with the weather. The coat smelled like him, clean wool, faint oolong, and something else I could not place, something metallic and sharp, like ozone before a storm. His black SUV was idling at the curb, the refrigerator man holding the rear door open. "Don't go home tonight," Domenico said. It was not a request. It was an order, delivered in a quiet, civilized tone. My spine stiffened instantly. "Don't tell me what to do." I expected a spark of anger, a flash of the man from the docks. Instead, the corner of his mouth quirked, the barest hint of a smile. It was so unexpected, it almost made me stumble. It changed his entire face for a fraction of a second. "Then do what you want," he said, his voice softer, almost rough. "But be safe." I clutched the folder and his coat. I turned my back on him and the open door of his car. I started walking down the glistening street, my posture rigid. I could feel his eyes on my back. I did not look around, but I knew he was still there, standing in the rain. He was watching me walk away, and his gaze held a weight that went far beyond a simple, calculated alliance. I did not go back to my apartment. I could not. I was wearing Domenico Fazzari's coat, a piece of armor that smelled like ozone and expensive wool, and I knew my shoebox apartment was no longer safe. The red dot had burned that illusion away. I went to the only fortress I had, the back of Jules's taco truck, parked in a tow-away zone under the Harborview Bridge. "Kaya," I said into my burner phone, "we're on." We met at 2 a.m., the three of us huddled around the stainless steel prep counter, the air thick with the smell of onions and anxiety. Kaya Lemaire is a ghost in the machine, a digital phantom who can build a firewall with one hand while tearing down a corporate server with the other. She owed Jules a favor that involved a lost shipping manifest and a truckload of avocados. I laid the manila folder on the counter. "This is from Fazari. It's the money. It links Varys Hale directly to Komodo." Kaya whistled, a long, low note. "You're swimming with the apex predator, Lena, hoping he doesn't bite." "I'm hunting," I corrected her, my voice hard. "And I need a spear. We have 72 hours until the city council holds its public hearing on the new tidal front project. That is our stage. That is where we burn them down." I put my vintage recorder on the table next. "This is the sound. I have the sea glass audio. I have them planning forced planning and the pressure cooker. But it's not enough. I need to link Varys to that specific conversation. I need his voice." "You want his passwords," Kaya said, her fingers already flying across the keyboard of her laptop, which was plugged into Jules's generator. "I want his voice," I said. "We're going to build a timeline, an acoustic map. I've already isolated the ambient sounds from the sea glass recording, the 1:17 a.m. train whistle, the 2:05 a.m. chimes from the old cathedral, the 2:31 a.m. screech of the electric bus on the 3rd Street line. We are going to find those exact acoustic markers in the background of Varys Hale's own phone calls. We are going to put him in that room." "The harbor chorus," Jules whispered, his eyes wide. "I love it." "Exactly," I said. "But to do that, I need to get inside the MCB. I need to bug the heart of the beast." I used the black metal card again. The same clipped voice answered. "The hearing is in 72 hours. I need to get inside the MCB. I need to get audio from Varys Hale's conference room." There was a long silence. I could hear faint, classical music on the other end. This is outside the parameters. "What?" "He's planning to burn the original audio files from my case," I said, my voice rising. "He's erasing the past. Komodo is clearing the board, and if he wins, my friend Jules loses his truck, and my neighbors lose their homes. I'm not asking for your permission. I'm asking for your terms." Another pause. "Mister, Fazari respects a focused objective, but his condition stands. No blood, no bodies. I don't hurt people. I listen to them. A mobile broadcast van, belonging to a local news affiliate, will be parked on 3rd and Bay. It is on loan. The keys will be under the mat. It will be your ear. Do not get caught." The line went dead. The Municipal Communications Bureau is a tower of smoked glass and steel. It pretends to be transparent, but it is built entirely of one-way mirrors. 48 hours to the hearing. I became a ghost, a gray janitorial uniform, a mop bucket, and an ID I had lifted from a locker at the bus terminal. I walked in through the service entrance. People do not see the help. They look straight through you. Kaya was in my ear, a tiny, untraceable bud. "You're clean. Head to the service elevator. Top floor." Varys Hale's executive conference room was my target. It was where the real decisions were made. The room was dark, the long, polished table reflecting the city lights like a black pool. The water cooler in the corner hummed softly. "You have 2 minutes until the night guard's patrol sweeps your floor," Kaya's voice crackled. I moved fast, kneeling by the cooler. The P mic was a tiny black dot, no bigger than a grain of rice. I slipped it behind the motor's ventilation grill, where the machine's own hum would mask its electronic signature. I linked it to the broadcast van's frequency. "It's in," I whispered. "Kaya, the cloud, Komodo's servers. I need the forced planning map they mentioned." "Already working on it," she said. "They use a private server for their development plans, but they linked its climate control to the building's main HVAC system. Sloppy. I'm going in through an air conditioner." My earpiece hissed. Footsteps, the electronic swoosh of the door sliding open. I did not have time to hide. I grabbed my mop, dipped it, and started on the floor, my back to the door. Just another anonymous cleaner. Varys Hale. He was not alone. I don't like it. Varys, another man said. The press is getting curious about the diner incident. The girl is a nobody, Varys snapped, his voice oily and arrogant. I kept mopping, my movements slow, rhythmic. But I agree, it's time to clean house. The council hearing is a formality, but I want our tracks covered. Get down to the archive. I want all the original audio files from the old complaints, especially that Mirek case from a few years ago, pulled and incinerated. Everything, before Monday. My blood turned to ice, and he was not just burying his current crimes, he was erasing my past. And the Komodo cloud, the other man asked. Wipe it. Burn the physical drives. After the hearing. None of this ever happened. My earpiece buzzed, a tiny vibration. Lena, I'm in. Kaya whispered, her voice tight with triumph. I've got the map. It's a full infrastructure plan for resident relocation. Forced evacuations, the whole thing. And Varys Hale's digital signature is on the final approval. I'm pulling it now. Get out of here, Varys said to his associate, his voice moving toward the door. And tell Komodo to move up the timeline for the girl. I want her gone by morning. The door swooshed shut. I was alone in the dark room, the smell of citrus-scented floor cleaner stinging my nose. I dropped the mop and ran. I did not go for the service elevator. It was too slow. I went for the main hall. I rounded the corner toward the public elevators, pushing my cart. 4 men, blocking the exit. They were not building security. They wore crisp, gray paramilitary-style uniforms. They had no badges, just a small, embroidered patch on the shoulder, a stylized UCC, Urban Civil Corps, the mayor's new public safety initiative, Komodo's private army, dressed in city-sanctioned uniforms. One of them looked at me. His eyes narrowed. He was holding a tablet with my picture on it, the photo from the diner. Hey, you stop. I did not stop. I did the only thing I could. I jammed my foot against the wheel of the mop bucket and kicked it hard. The bucket spun, and a wave of filthy, greasy water sloshed across the high-gloss marble floor. The point man hit the water and his feet went out from under him. He went down in a clatter of tactical gear. I ran. I slammed the button for the service elevator, the one I had ignored. The door dinged open. I threw myself inside and hit the button for the roof. Arf! I could hear them shouting, scrambling on the wet floor. The doors began to close. A hand, clad in a black tactical glove, shot through the gap, grabbing for me. I stomped on it with my heel. Hard. The man roared in pain. The hand vanished. The doors sealed. The elevator began its slow, groaning ascent. I was in a metal box, and they would be waiting for me in the lobby. The roof was my only choice. The elevator opened onto a utility roof, cold and windswept. Gravel crunched under my janitor's boots. The roof was connected by a short, enclosed walkway to the spiral parking garage next door. I sprinted across the walkway, the wind tearing at my thin uniform. And there, on the top level of the empty garage, parked under the sick, flickering yellow lights, was a single black SUV. It was not waiting. It was stationed. The side door was open. It was not just a vehicle, it was a mobile command post. A bank of laptops glowed, screens showing multiple camera feeds, including one of the lobby I had just fled. The refrigerator-sized man was at the wheel. Domenico Fazzari was standing by the open door, watching me run toward him. I stumbled to a halt, panting. My adrenaline so high I was shaking. My earpiece was crackling with Kaya's panicked voice. Lena, are you out? I've got a massive security alert from the MCB building." He did not ask if I was okay. He did not ask what happened. He simply reached into a cooler inside the van, pulled out a cold bottle of water, and handed it to me. Then he handed me a thick, warm, folded towel from a compartment I had not seen. I drank the entire bottle in one go, the cold water burning my throat. I wiped the sweat and grime from my face. "They have a private army," I said, my voice hoarse. "The UCC. They were waiting for me. They knew. They are new," Domenico said, He was watching the garage entrance. Not me. Amateurs, but they are desperate. Desperate men are dangerous. He turned to me, and his gaze was heavy. This is finished. Lena, you have the map. Kaya has the audio feed. You won. Let my man drive you to a safe house, a cabin upstate. You can be there in 3 hours. My people will handle the rest. They will leak the files to the press. I looked at the glowing dashboard of his high-tech fortress. He wanted to take my evidence, my fight, and finish it for me. He wanted to pack me away in a cabin while he handled it. He wanted to save me. No. His frown was barely perceptible. They will kill you. They are not the fools from the diner. They will not stop. I'm not leaking this as an anonymous file, I said, my voice shaking but firm. I am not running. I'm going to that hearing in person. I'm going to stand up in front of Varys Hale and the entire city council, and I am going to serve this hot. He stared at me for a long time. The wind whipped my hair across my face. I did not look away. I saw the calculation in his eyes, the assessment. He was weighing the risk. He was weighing me. Finally, he nodded. Once, a short, sharp gesture of acceptance. He reached into his pocket. He did not pull out a gun. He produced a small, elegant knife. It was a folding paring knife, the kind a chef might carry, with a short, sharp blade. It was small enough to be perfectly legal. He pressed it into my hand, his fingers closing over mine for a fraction of a second. His skin was warm, despite the cold. For cutting wires, he said, his voice rough. Not for hurting. I closed my hand around the small, solid weight. The air between us was thick with things we were not saying. He had offered me an escape, and I had refused. He was offering me a weapon instead. It was a different kind of alliance. He looked at me for a beat longer than was necessary, his eyes tracing the lines of my face in the dim, yellow light. See, I have to serve this hot. I said, Be safe, Lena, he said, his voice quiet. I turned and walked away from the safety of his car, back toward the stairwell, and down into the city that wanted me dead. The safe house was not a house. It was a loft, high above Whitlow Street, in a building that looked like an abandoned textile mill. The elevator opened directly into the space, a vast open room of old brick and massive timber beams. It was the opposite of my apartment. It was warm, clean, and impossibly quiet. Strings of small, golden lights were strung between the beams, casting a soft glow over a few pieces of dark, comfortable furniture. It was not a home. It was a sanctuary. It was his. My vintage tape recorder sat on a heavy wooden workbench, already plugged in and charging, treated like a piece of art. I was still shaking, the adrenaline from the MCB building and the rooftop confrontation draining away, leaving me hollow and cold. My wrist was stinging. In the scramble down the parking garage stairwell, I had scraped it against the raw concrete. Domenico shut the heavy steel door of the elevator, and the sound of the city vanished. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the sound of him walking to a deep sink in the corner, set into a long marble counter. He turned on the water, not a splashy faucet, but a smooth, quiet stream. He began to wash his hands, methodically, scrubbing his palms and knuckles with black soap. I watched him. He was not a man of wasted movements. He was preparing, cleansing the grit of the city from his skin. He turned, drying his hands on a linen towel. His eyes found the raw scrape on my wrist. I had been unconsciously rubbing it. He walked to a cabinet and took out a small, metal first aid box. He did not come to me. He placed it on the central table and opened it. Inside, things were arranged with military precision. He took out a packet of antiseptic wipe and a sterile gauze pad. He held the gauze out, not moving toward me, but offering. I hesitated. I was so used to tending to my own wounds, physical and otherwise. To accept this felt like admitting a weakness, but I was so very tired. I stepped forward and held out my arm. His fingers brushed my skin. It was the first time he had touched me with any kind of gentleness. His touch was not cold, as I had expected. It was incredibly warm and impossibly light. He held my wrist. his thumb resting on my pulse point, feeling the frantic bird-like rhythm of my heart. He looked at me, his dark eyes asking a silent question. "May I?" I gave a small nod, my throat tight. He cleaned the scrape, his movements slow, deliberate, and incredibly gentle. He was not just cleaning a wound, he was calming a frightened animal. Every light touch sent a jolt through my system, a current that had nothing to do with fear. When he was done, he wrapped the small white pad around my wrist and secured it with tape, his fingers lingering for just a second. "You need to rest," he said. His voice was low, the gravelly edge softened by the quiet of the room. "I cannot rest," I said, pulling my hand back, the absence of his touch leaving my skin cold. "The hearing is in 36 hours. I have to edit the audio. I have to line up the timestamps. I have to build the chorus." "You cannot build it if you collapse." He walked over to my recorder and ran one long finger over the metal casing. "This is a beautiful machine. It captures the truth." He looked back at me. "What is your favorite sound, Lena?" The question was so unexpected. It wrong-footed me. "What?" "Your favorite sound, the one you would save, if you could only save one." I had to think for a second. "The sound of a needle," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Just before the music starts, that little bit of static and dust, that impossibility before the first note." He nodded. A slow, understanding gesture. He knew exactly what I meant. "And you?" I asked, suddenly needing to know. He turned to look out the massive, arched window. The rain had started again, a soft, insistent tapping against the 19th century glass. 3 a.m., he said. The sound of water hitting the hull of a container ship, a deep, hollow sound. It means the cargo is empty, the job is done, and all that's left is the water and the dark. We stood there, 2 feet apart, having shared something more intimate than a secret. We had shared the quiet parts of ourselves, the sounds that defined us. The space between us was no longer just air. It was a heavy, vibrating field. I could feel the heat of him, smell the clean scent of the soap and the faint, lingering ozone that always seemed to cling to him. He took a step. I did not move back. He lifted his hand, not to my arm this time, but to my face. He stopped, his fingers hovering an inch from my cheek. Again, that silent question. I leaned my face into his touch. His fingers were rough, calloused, but his touch was a whisper against my skin. His thumb brushed the tired skin under my eye. I looked up at him, and he was not the mafia boss. He was not the shadow on the docks. He was just a man, with a scar on his arm and a profound loneliness in his eyes that matched my own. The distance closed. He bent his head. I rose onto my toes. He rested his forehead against mine. We stood like that for a full minute, breathing each other's air. I could feel the slow, steady beat of his heart through the front of his shirt. It was so calm, so strong. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in my life, the constant, frantic buzzing in my own head went quiet. "Okay," I whispered. It was all I could manage. It was permission. It was surrender. His lips touched mine. It was not a kiss of passion or hunger. It was a kiss of profound, staggering relief. It was warm. It was slow. It was the sound of a needle finding the groove. He kissed me as if he had all the time in the world, as if the city was not hunting me, as if his own dark world was a million miles away. He tasted of oolong tea and something sharp, like iron. He pulled back, just an inch, his forehead still against mine. His eyes were open and he was watching me. He was checking to see if I was still there. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of his mouth. I smiled back. He kissed me again, deeper this time. A slow exploration. His hand moved from my face to my shoulder, his grip firm, grounding me. My own hands found the solid expanse of his chest, clutching the material of his sweater. His other hand went to the small of my back, not pulling me closer, just holding me, supporting me. All of it was voluntary. All of it was respect. When the kiss broke, we were both breathing a little faster. The silence of the loft rushed back in to fill the space. He did not lead me to a bed. He guided me to a long, deep sofa in the center of the room. We sat, and the exhaustion of the last few days hit me like a physical blow. I sagged against the cushions. He disappeared for a moment and came back with his heavy wool overcoat, the one I had worn from the tea house. He unfolded it and draped it over me like a blanket. It was impossibly heavy, weighted with his protection. He sat on the couch, near my feet, not crowding me, but not leaving either. It was a sentinel. I laid down, my head on the arm of the sofa, my legs curled up. The coat was a cocoon. "You are safe here," he said, his voice a low vibration in the dark room. I looked at him, the golden light catching the high planes of his face, the shadow of his scar. "With you," I whispered. "I am." I fell asleep. Not a light, twitchy, one-eye open sleep. I fell into a deep, black, dreamless void. I woke hours later. The rain was a steady drum on the roof, a gentle, insulating sound. The golden lights were still on. Domenico had not moved. He was not asleep. He was sitting in the same spot, watching the rain beat against the window. He was guarding my sleep. The little green light on my tape recorder was blinking steadily, a silent, non-invasive witness. I sat up, the heavy coat pooling in my lap. He turned, his eyes clear and alert. There was no awkwardness, no morning after regret. We were two soldiers who had shared a watch. I moved to sit beside him, by the window. The pre-dawn light was starting to turn the sky from black to a deep, bruised purple. We sat in silence, watching Halcyon Bay wake up. There were no grand promises. He did not offer me forever. He did not tell me he would burn the world down for me. We both knew the truth. His world was made of shadows, and mine was made of sound. A promise of always would have been a lie. But this, the quiet of the morning, the shared space, the freedom to choose to be here, this was real. This was the promise of tomorrow. He reached over and lightly touched the cool metal of my tape recorder, which sat between us on the windowsill. His fingers grazed the turning reel. "Keep it close to your heart," he said. I looked at him, at the man who had kept his word, who had provided the proof, who had guarded my sleep, who had kissed me like I was something to be saved. "And you," I whispered, "keep your word." The piece of the loft was a fragile thing, and it shattered at 7 a.m. The attack did not come from the UCC. It came from the television. Kaya's call was a shriek. "Lena, turn it on. Any channel." I clicked on the local news, and my blood ran cold. It was my face, but it was not my face. It was a grotesque, photoshopped version. Me in the blue Comet uniform, but the neckline was plunged impossibly low. Me laughing, draped over the shoulders of the finance bro who had filmed me. Me, accepting a handful of cash from a blurred-out figure. The headline was, "Poison Waitress's fame grabbed the unstable past of the Comet's victim." They were using my old MCB complaint. They had unsealed my juvenile record. They painted me as a disgruntled, failed sound engineer with a history of making unfounded accusations. I was not a citizen seeking justice. I was a serial opportunist and a known fabricator, using a simple fall to leverage a vendetta against Komodo developments. The shame was a physical, choking thing. It was the digital version of the laughter in the diner. Domenico stood, watching the screen, his face carved from granite. "This is Varus's pressure cooker," he said. As if on cue, the breaking news chyron flashed across the bottom of the screen. A warehouse on the South Docks was ablaze, a massive chemical fire. "Kaya, what is that?" I said into the phone. "It's a diversion, Lena," she said, her voice tight with panic. "Komodo's records annex. They are burning the hard copies. They are erasing the paper trail." "Let them," I said, my voice shaking. "We have the digital. We have the audio." "No, Lena, you don't understand," she almost screamed. "The fire isn't the real move. Varus Hale just got an emergency warrant from the Special Administrative Court, Sina." The EAC. It's not a real court. Lena, it's a private, corporate tribunal. The warrant is for your arrest. The broadcast anchor read the charges with manufactured gravity. Lena Mirek, wanted for questioning in connection with corporate espionage, wire fraud, and conspiracy to incite public unrest. I was not a witness anymore. I was a fugitive. Domenico clicked the television off. The vast loft plunged back into the heavy silence, broken only by the rising howl of the wind outside. A storm was coming. "It is time," he said, "for the hearing." To leave. He turned, his face void of all the softness from the night before. "I have a car waiting. It will take you to a private airfield in New Hampshire. You will be in Montreal in 2 hours. My people will release the data. We will win this, but you will be gone." He was offering me the escape I had craved my entire life, safety, an exit, the one thing I had never had. I looked at my tape recorder, its reels poised and ready. "No?" He stopped, a heavy black bag halfway into his hand. "This is not a discussion. The UCC are not police. They are Komodo's private army. They will not arrest you. Lena, they will disappear you." "And you?" I challenged, my voice finding a steel I did not know it possessed. "Are you going to handle me? Are you going to carry me out of here while I'm screaming? Are you going to save me?" His eyes went cold. "I said no," I repeated, my voice solid, absolute. "I told Varys Hale I would serve this hot. I told you I stand up by myself. If I run now, they win. They prove I'm just a fame-grabbing waitress who got scared. They prove their lies are true. I am not running." He studied me for a long, silent moment. He was weighing the asset against the liability. He was weighing the mission against the woman. He dropped the bag. "Then we fight," he said, his voice rough, "in the storm." Harborview was on lockdown. We could not go back to my apartment, but the neighborhood was already fighting back. Domenico had made one call. Soft perimeter, no visibility, no engagement, just presence. Orion's men were ghosts. They were the new construction crew on the corner. They were the city workers checking a gas main. They were an invisible wall of protection around the entire district. The visible wall was Jules. He had rallied every food truck in Halcyon Bay. They were circled up in the central square like a modern wagon train. The Wandering Tortilla, Rocco's Pizza, the Clam Shack. A huge, hand-painted banner was strung between two of them, flapping wildly in the rising wind. It read, "Full bellies fight better." Jules was handing out free bowls of hot chowder to my neighbors, the old women from the fish market, the mothers from the canning factories. They were not scared. They were organized. "The city is shutting down, Lena!" Jules yelled over the wind, thrusting a hot coffee into my hand. "Tropical Storm Ophion, they're closing the seawall at midnight, and the midnight ferry is the last boat allowed in or out of the harbor. You have to be on it to get to City Hall." The ferry terminal was 3 miles away. The wind was already a high-pitched, metallic scream, tearing at the buildings. Rain was falling in horizontal sheets, so hard it stung like needles. The terminal plaza was supposed to be deserted. It was not. A line of them, at least 20, stood blocking the gangplank, the urban civil corps, the gray-shirted private army, their faces impassive behind rain-slicked visors. They were not checking tickets. They were waiting for me. "This is it," Domenico said, his voice a low growl beside me. "Stay behind me." I gripped the handle of my heavy broadcast case. "No, beside you." He glanced at me, a quick, hard appraisal, a flicker of that almost smile. He nodded. We walked out of the alley into the exposed, wind-blasted plaza. The UCC commander spotted me. His hand went up. "Lena Mirek, by order of the EAC, you are under..." Domenico did not run. He did not reach for a weapon. He just walked forward. His pace was steady, his shoulders back. He was a target in a dark sweater, rain plastering his hair to his skull. He was walking straight into a line of armed men. "She is a private citizen," Domenico's voice boomed, cutting through the storm. "She has a ticket for the ferry." This is a restricted zone. Fazari, the commander snapped, recognizing him instantly. Step aside. I don't think I will. He kept walking. When he was forcing their hand, they would either have to shoot him, an unarmed, prominent logistics CEO, in front of the terminal's security cameras, or they would have to move. He put himself between me and the line. He opened his coat, the one he had thrown on in the car, creating a shield with his own body and the heavy wool, ushering me toward the gangplank. Now, Lena, he commanded. The commander snarled, his hand on his sidearm. He wanted to give the order, but the optics were a disaster. He hesitated. That hesitation was all we needed. Cast off, a woman's voice roared from the ferry's bridge. Cast off. Now. We scrambled onto the wet metal deck. The ferry's engines thrummed, and the boat lurched violently away from the dock, the thick ropes snapping free. The UCC troops rushed the gangplank, but it was too late. We were in the channel. The fight was not over. A spotlight cut through the rain. A low, fast-bodied speedboat, military gray, surged out from behind a pier. It was a Komodo pursuit boat. It was faster than the old ferry. They're gonna board us, I screamed over the wind. May, Domenico roared up at the bridge. Hard to port now! The old ferry groaned, turning sharply, the deck tilting. The speedboat anticipated the move, cutting us off, boxing us in against a line of dark, skeletal pilings. They're trying to run us aground. No, Domenico said, his eyes scanning the darkness. They're not... Fwoom! A streak of red light shot into the sky from the north dock, exploding in a bright crimson starburst, a maritime flare. A moment later, another one rose from the south. Orion, I breathed. The channel markers are lies, Domenico said, his voice tight. Komodo moved them to trap us. My men are marking the true channel. Up on the bridge, the captain, a tough old woman with white hair braided tight May Torvik, a dock ally and a legend, did not hesitate. She ignored the official, blinking green buoys and steered the clumsy ferry straight between the two red flares. The Komodo speedboat, blinded by the flares and following the fake markers, did not turn in time. There was a sickening crunch of fiberglass on submerged steel. The boat slammed into a forgotten pylon, its spotlight dying instantly. It stopped dead, waves washing over its bow. We were through. The rest of the crossing was a battle against the ocean. The ferry pitched and rolled in the massive swell, the storm now at its full, screaming peak. I was on the exposed deck, clutching my broadcast case to my chest, my knuckles white. Domenico stood beside me, an immovable object. He placed his hand on my shoulder, his grip like iron, anchoring me to the heaving deck. He leaned in, his voice a low growl in my ear, the only sound in the world besides the wind. Do not let the storm decide this story, he said. The ferry slammed against the city-side dock with a groan of tortured metal. I looked up. Through the wall of water, I saw it. City Hall? It was not the shining beacon from the mayor's videos. It was a fortress, a monolithic block of dark, wet stone. Its windows lit like angry eyes against the raging storm. It looked like a massive, defiant ship, braced for impact. Our stage, the city council chamber, was a theater of humidity and cheap wood paneling. Every seat was packed. We had slipped in during the chaos of the storm, my heavy broadcast case on a rolling audio-visual cart, me in a borrowed AV technician's polo shirt. The air was thick, smelling of wet wool and desperation. Outside, Tropical Storm Ophion raged, rattling the tall, narrow windows. But inside, Varys Hale was generating his own weather system. He was at the podium, radiating sincere, polished corruption. His face was set in a mask of civic concern. Necessary revitalization, he was saying, his voice smooth and amplified by the room's PA system. The new title front is not just a project, it is a promise of safety, of progress, of shared public interest. We must, as a city, be willing to make the hard choices today for a brighter, cleaner tomorrow. I was at the back, near the main aisle. My reel-to-reel recorder was the heart of the system, my weapon hidden in plain sight. Kaya was a ghost in my ear, patched in through a burner phone. "I'm in. Lena, the 20 speakers are live. The street performers are seated. One in every other row. I'm looped into the main board. On your mark." The council chairperson, a woman who looked bored, tapped her microphone. "We will now open the floor to a brief period of public comment. We have time for one speaker." "I have a comment," I said. My voice was too loud, cutting through the polite applause for Varys. I stepped forward, pushing the AV cart. Every eye in the room swiveled to me. Varys Hale saw me. His polite smile faltered, a tiny hairline crack in the facade. He recognized me. "Ma'am, you are not registered to speak," the chairperson said, shuffling her papers. "I'm not here to speak," I said, my hand hitting the play button. "I'm here to play." First, the sound of analog tape hiss, a warm, ancient, honest sound. It filled the chamber, silencing the whispers. Then, the sound of the 1:17 a.m. freight train, the long, mournful blast I had recorded at Sea Glass. It echoed in the chamber, loud and clear. And under it, Varys Hale's voice, captured by my bug in the MCB. "The Harborview tenants are getting loud. Varys Hale is starting the public pressure cooker phase tomorrow." A gasp went through the room. Varys's face, projected on the screens flanking the podium, went white. I let the tape run. The next acoustic marker faded in the faint, distant chimes of the old cathedral, 2:05 a.m. And Varys's voice again, colder this time. And the holdouts, the taco truck, the diner, followed by the Komodo executive's reply, "That's what force planning is for. A few small, accidental fires." People were standing up, shouting. The final sound, the high-pitched screech of the electric bus on the 3rd Street line, 2:31 a.m. And Varys, his voice sharp, arrogant from just last night, "Get down to the archive. I want all the original audio files, pulled and incinerated. Everything before Monday." The chamber erupted. Varys Hale was exposed, his mask completely shattered. He was sweating under the hot lights, his eyes darting wildly. He looked like what he was, a rat in a trap. "Shut it off," he shrieked, pointing at me. "Shut it off." The urban civil corps, the gray-shirted goons, moved. They had been posted by the walls. They knew where the AV booth was. One of them slammed his hand on the main breaker. The lights went out. The PA system died. The room was plunged into near darkness, lit only by emergency exit signs and the howling storm outside. The audio tape stopped. A second of absolute terrifying silence. Click. The sound of a small lithium-ion battery engaging, then another and another. The recording started again, right where it left off, pulled and incinerated. The sound was coming from everywhere. From the front row, from the balcony, from the aisles. The 20 street performers had all switched on their portable amplifiers. The harbor chorus was now in surround sound. Then, a deeper boom. From outside, Jules, the food truck brigade, had wired their systems into the independent media feed. The sound was now being blasted across the plaza, echoing off the wet stone of City Hall, louder than the storm itself. In the dim light, all I could see was the glow of 100 cell phones, all held high, all live streaming. Kaya's voice was electric in my ear. "We're viral. Lena. The hashtag is #ListenHalcyon. The indie blogs are carrying it. The whole city is listening." "Arrest her!" Varys screamed, his voice raw, no microphone. "Arrest her! I have a warrant from the EAC. She is a fugitive." The gray shirts moved, converging on me. They were pushing through the crowd. I backed away, my cart rolling backward. I hit the main chamber doors, locked. They had sealed the exits. I was trapped. The UCC commander reached me. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in like claws. "Lena Mirek, you are under." The heavy oak doors of the chamber burst open. Domenico Fazzari stood in the doorway. He was not in armor. He was in a simple, dark suit, soaking wet, his hair plastered to his head. He was alone. He did not draw a weapon. He did not raise his voice. He simply stood in the frame, blocking the exit, and spread his arms wide, his palms open. The UCC commander stopped, his hand still on my arm. "Let her go," Domenico said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the din of the crowd and the audio playback. It was the coldest sound I had ever heard. "This is official city business. Fazzari," the commander snarled, trying to regain his authority. "She is under arrest by the EAC." "This," Domenico said, taking one step into the room, "is a port matter now." He looked past the commander at every gray-shirted officer in the room. "Touch her again," he said, "and you are declaring war on the port. Every union, every truck, every crane, every ship. Halcyon Bay stops tonight." It was not a threat. It was a weather report. The commander's hand trembled. He knew he could arrest me, but he could not arrest the Orion Syndicate. He could not fight the entire city's infrastructure. He hesitated. "What is the meaning of this?" A new voice, sharp, authoritative. 3 people in dark, conservative suits stood behind Domenico. Their faces were grim. One of them held up a tablet, the Listen Halcyon live stream playing on it. "We are from the Urban Roadway Commission," the lead woman said, her eyes boring into Varys Hale. "The EAC is a subcommittee under our jurisdiction. Director Hale, this hearing is suspended. Your administrative authority is revoked, pending a full and public investigation." The UCC commander dropped my arm like it was on fire. Varys Hale looked like he had been shot. I looked past them, into the hallway. Domenico was still there, his arms still wide. He had not moved. He had not drawn blood. He had not thrown a punch. He had simply stood in the doorway and held it open for me. He had kept his word. The victory in the council chamber was a paper shield against the real storm. We were not safe. We were just exposed. Kaya's voice was a burst of static in the car, an Orion sedan navigating the flooded streets. "Lena, they're not running. They're cutting their losses. Komodo just sent a team to the Starling Pier bonded warehouse. That's where they kept the physical backups, the original servers. They are not just wiping them. Lena, they are torching the building." This was it, the final desperate move. Varys was the distraction, Domenico said from the passenger seat, his voice a low growl. The URC had taken his statement, but he had refused their protective custody. "The data you have is a copy. If the original source is destroyed, they will claim your audio was a deep fake, a fabrication. They will bury this in court for years." "Starling Pier," I said to the driver, the refrigerator-sized man from the diner. "Now, it is not a request, Lena," Domenico said, turning to me, his eyes black in the dark car. "It is a war zone." He was right. Starling Pier was chaos. The storm had ripped the tin roofs off 2 of the warehouses. The wind was a solid wall, and the sea was coming over the concrete barriers. Komodo's team was already there. They were not the gray-shirted UCC. These were professionals. They wore black tactical gear, their faces hidden by ballistic masks painted with the ghostly, trailing image of a jellyfish. The jellyfish masks, Komodo's private military, their deniable asset. They were setting incendiary charges. Then, Orion moved. From the shadows between the stacked containers, a different team emerged. They wore no insignia, just matte black, reinforced gear, the Black Phoenix, Domenico's elite. They did not move with guns raised. They moved with shields. It was not a firefight. It was a strategy. A volley of small canisters arced through the rain, hissing as they landed. Not tear gas, but a low-dose chemical smoke, thick and disorienting. The jellyfish masks faltered, coughing. Then came the nets, fired from launchers. Weighted nets tangled 2 of the mercs, sending them crashing to the pavement. The Black Phoenix advanced, shields interlocked, a Roman testudo in the middle of a tropical storm. They were pushing, containing, hurting the mercenaries, forcing them back from the warehouse, never firing a single shot. It was brutal, but it was non-lethal. "I have to go," I said, my hand on the door. Domenico's hand clamped on my arm. "No, my men will retrieve the drive." "They cannot," I said, meeting his gaze, my voice flat. "The drive is useless without me. It's not just encrypted, the server is synced to the original reel-to-reel tape. The file integrity is verified by an audio checksum, a unique acoustic profile from the tape hiss, and the motor's specific wow and flutter. It's an analog key. Without me and my machine, it's just a brick. I am the only one who can unlock it. He stared at me, his jaw tight. He was trapped between his need to protect me and his promise to let me stand on my own. "I am not asking," I said softly. "I'm telling you, this is my part." He let go of my arm. "Go, they will clear your path." I grabbed my bag, the small paring knife he had given me heavy in my pocket. I ran into the wind. The Black Phoenix team saw me. They did not stop me. They formed a moving wedge, shields to the wind, creating a corridor of calm for me through the chaos. I reached the warehouse door and slipped inside. The warehouse was a cathedral of shelves, filled with paper records and old servers. In the center, a man in a wet, expensive suit was pouring gasoline from a can onto a stack of hard drives. Rutherford Quayle, the Komodo manager, the man who had been giving Varys Hale his orders. He heard me and spun, a Zippo lighter in his hand. "The bitch from the diner," he spat, his face slick with rain and sweat. "You just do not know when to die, do you?" "It's over, Quayle," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was trying to hammer its way out of my chest. "The URC has suspended Hale. It's done." He laughed, a high, barking sound. "Done, you idiot." He flicked the lighter. The flame snapped to life. "You got the puppet, Varys Hale, the MCB. They were just a shield, a convenient, public-facing target to absorb the noise. Komodo. Komodo is so much bigger than that pathetic little bureaucrat, and this..." He patted the hard drive. "This is the real power, and you will not have it." He was right. I had only cut off the arm. He was the brain. Crack. The sound was not a gunshot. It was the sound of the warehouse groaning under the force of the storm. A massive crack split the ceiling beams. A torrent of freezing seawater and rain poured into the warehouse, dousing a third of the room in an instant. Quayle stumbled back, shielding the lighter. He raised it high, ready to drop it onto the gasoline-soaked drives. One more step, and I fry it all. I did not move. I looked up. A heavy canvas safety net, the kind used for loading cargo, was rolled up and tied to the rafter just above him. The release rope, thick and braided, was tied to a cleat on a pillar, 10 feet away from me. I did not have time. My hand went to my pocket, the paring knife for cutting wires. I pulled it out, flicked it open. Quayle's eyes widened, thinking I meant to attack him. "This was never a weapon yet," I whispered. With a flick of my wrist, I threw the knife. It was not a perfect throw, but it was a desperate one. The small, sharp blade spun end over end, and the tip snagged the braided rope, slicing through half the fibers. The weight of the wet canvas did the rest. The rope snapped. The heavy net fell, unfurling a massive wet spiderweb. It hit Quayle with a heavy thud, driving him to his knees. The Zippo flew from his hand, tumbling in a small, fiery arc. It hit the concrete and slid, hissing into the rising puddle of seawater. The flame died. Quayle scrambled out from under the net and ran, splashing through the water toward a rear stairwell. I let him go. I ran to the servers, grabbed the central drive, and clutched it to my chest. I heard a crash from the stairwell. I ran out, my boots slipping in the mud and debris. I saw Quayle. Halfway up the metal stairs, Domenico was at the top, blocking his path, a shadow against the storm. Quayle turned, trapped. He looked at Domenico, a man he clearly knew, and his arrogance returned. "You cannot touch me. Fazari, you kill me, and the feds will tear your logistics empire apart. It's not your style. No blood, right?" Domenico did not move. "You are right," he said. He stepped aside. Quayle, confused, scrambled up the last few steps, laughing. He reached the landing and ran straight into a wall of light. The URC investigation team, flanked by federal marshals, had their cameras live, broadcasting. Quayle, his face a mask of terror, froze in the glare. Domenico had not chased him. He had herded him, just as his men had herded the mercs. He had pushed him, alive and talking, into the custody of the law. The case was closed. My knees gave out, the adrenaline, the cold, the victory. It all hit me at once. I started to fall, my hands slipping in the mud, the precious hard drive almost falling. A body slammed into me, catching me before I hit the ground. Domenico. He did not just catch me, he absorbed the full, dead weight of my fall, his arms wrapping around me, his body shielding me from the wind. He held me for a second, then his grip changed. He did not lift me. He planted his feet and held me steady, letting me find my own balance, letting me stand up myself, even as he supported me. When I was standing, he did not let go. He pulled me in, his face buried in my wet hair, his arms crushing me to him in an embrace that was not about sex or gentleness. It was about survival, a desperate, wordless acknowledgement that we had both made it through the fire. The storm howled, a final, defeated roar. We stumbled to the partial shelter of a corrugated tin roof, leaning against each other, completely soaked, covered in mud, and utterly spent. A flash of lightning illuminated the pier, freezing us in a white-hot tableau. I looked up at him. His hair was plastered to his skull, water running in rivers down his face, and he was smiling, not the quirk at the corner of his mouth, a real, tired, victorious smile. I started to laugh, a shaky, hysterical sound. A crackle came from a radio on the belt of a nearby Black Phoenix guard. All units. URC has full control. Hale is in custody. Komodo assets are frozen. All warrants for Lena Mirek are void. Repeat, all warrants are void. Domenico leaned his forehead against mine. Just as he had in the loft, the storm was still raging, but it was outside us now. It is done, and I whispered. He pulled back, his eyes serious again, though the smile lingered. No, the legal fight is done, but the MCB and Komodo sold them a lie. He gestured toward the city, hidden behind the rain. Now, you have to sell them the truth. There is one last piece. Lena. He took my hand, the one not clutching the hard drive, and squeezed it. Announce it to the people. You lead. The morning after the storm was a miracle. The sky was scrubbed clean, a brilliant, painful blue. The air, washed of its usual grime, smelled of salt and ozone, and Tidefall Square was a sea of people. They had come from Harborview, from the fish markets, from the canning factories. They had come because they heard the broadcast, because they saw the live streams. They were my neighbors, and they were here to finish the fight. The stage was a joke, and it was perfect. A set of wooden loading crates, a single microphone on a wobbly stand, the speakers, loaned by the street performers, were strung up on old city flag lines, still dripping from the rain. My hands were steady. I walked up to the crates, carrying my vintage tape recorder. I placed it down. I did not need the hard drive. Not for this. I needed the original. I plugged the output of the recorder directly into the amplifier. I pressed play. The sound that filled the square was not a politician's smooth voice. It was the hiss of analog tape, the warm, unmistakable sound of the motor turning, the sound of truth, raw and unpolished, before the first note. I stepped to the microphone. I looked out at the crowd, at Jules, who was setting up his taco truck, his face split in a massive grin. My name is Lena Mirek, I said. My voice did not shake. It carried over the crowd. A few nights ago, I was working my shift at the Blue Comet Diner. I fell. A group of men laughed at me. They filmed me. I told them everything. I told them about the shame and the anger. I told them about the 14 SUVs that arrived in the dark, a silent, terrifying wall of power. I told them about the voice that said, apologize to her. But this is not about them, I said, my voice rising. This is about what I said that night. I said, I can get up myself. The crowd was silent, listening. So I got up, and I started to listen, and I heard the sound of our city being sold, right under our feet. I played the clips again, the 1:17 a.m. train whistle, the 2:05 a.m. chimes, the 2:31 a.m. bus, and under it all, the voices of Varys Hale and Rutherford Quayle, planning to burn our homes, to poison our lives, to erase us. When the tape clicked off, the silence was heavier than the storm. A woman from the URC, the one who had stopped the hearing, stepped up to the microphone. She looked exhausted, but her voice was steel. As of 5 a.m. this morning, she announced, Director Varys Hale has been indicted on 12 counts of bribery, fraud, and conspiracy. All assets of Komodo Developments have been frozen by federal marshals, and the new Tidal Front Revitalization Plan is officially suspended. It will be redrawn with full community oversight to protect the residents of Harborview. The sound that came from the crowd was not a cheer. It was a roar. It was the sound of 1,000 people, all getting up at once. Jules threw the window of his truck open and started handing out free breakfast tacos. The street musicians, my speaker brigade, started to play. A ragged, joyous, defiant blast of trumpets and drums. My tape, the sounds of the city, and the music all mingled. It was the true harbor chorus. Then the crowd parted. Domenico Fazzari walked toward the stage. He was in a fresh suit, dark and immaculate. He looked like the man from the diner again, powerful and remote. He did not come to my side. He stood a few feet away, a respectful distance. He took the microphone. He did not look at me. He looked at the people of Harborview. My name is Domenico Fazzari, he said, his voice the low gravel that had cut through the diner. The Orion Syndicate holds contracts for 90% of the port's logistics. We were contracted to manage the shipping for the new tidal front. The crowd quieted, suspicious. As of this morning, he continued, Orion is withdrawing from every contract related to this project. We will not move one piece of steel. We will not haul one bag of concrete. Our lines do not cross with men who burn families out of their homes. He was cutting his own profits. He was publicly drawing his boundary line, not with guns, but with business. He was making himself clean in front of them all. At that moment, a police car, flanked by 2 marshals' vehicles, pulled up to the edge of the square. They were leading Varys Hale, in handcuffs, to the car. He saw me. He saw Domenico. His face was a mask of purple rage. You, he screamed, lunging, but the marshals held him. You think you won. You think he loves you. He's a monster. No one will ever love a waitress. A nobody. Domenico did not turn. He did not flinch. He just stood there, a silent wall of granite. He slowly turned his head and looked at me. It was just a look. It was not a smile. It was a statement. You are not a nobody. The crowd did the rest. They turned on Varys. They did not shout. They did not throw anything. They just clapped. A slow, rhythmic, deafening wall of applause that drowned out his voice, that erased him. He was shoved into the car, a small, screaming man, defeated by a sound. When the cars were gone and the music swelled again, Domenico handed the microphone back. Our fingers did not touch. We left the stage, separate, and walked away from the cheering crowd. We slipped into a narrow side alley, smelling of wet brick and old newspapers. The noise of the square faded, replaced by the drip of water from a gutter. We stopped, facing each other. He looked tired. The scar on his arm was hidden by his suit, but I could feel it. The man from the loft was still there. He did not speak. He just stepped forward, his hand coming up to cup my jaw, his thumb brushing my cheek, and he kissed me, right there in the bright, unforgiving light of day. It was not the kiss from the loft. That was a kiss of relief. In the dark, this was a kiss of choice. It was gentle. It was certain. It was a promise made in the silence. After the storm, when he pulled back, I reached for his hand, our fingers laced together, not in a frantic grasp, but an easy, settled fit. I am not a good man, Lena, he said, his voice rough, his eyes holding mine. Not by the book. You know what I am. I smiled. I leaned my head against his chest, listening to the steady, calm beat of his heart. I did not need a saint, I whispered. I needed a man who keeps his word. The sun set on a different halcyon bay. The Blue Comet Diner was open, the neon sign buzzing, the smell of fresh coffee in the air. Sal had a new sign in the window, hand-painted and proud, weekend music curated by Lena Mirek. The door was propped open. From the street, you could hear the sound of an old jazz record playing, the warm hiss of the needle filling the night. And far down the block, parked in the shadows, was a line of 14 black SUVs. They were not a threat, they were a wall, silent, watchful, and respectful. My life did not become a fairy tale. It became real. The URC sent me a letter. They had created a new oversight position, acoustic transparency advisor for public hearings. It was a real job, with a real paycheck. Domenico signed a treaty, a clean port agreement negotiated with May Torvik and the Harborview Residents Committee. He did not become a good man. He just kept his lines clear. We did not promise forever. That is a word for stories. We just promised tomorrow. We promised that we would wake up and face the city and choose each other again. And in a city like Halcyon Bay, that is the most powerful oath of all. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I am curious. Where in the world are you listening from right now? Let me know in the comments so we can connect and share our thoughts. Please subscribe to the channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and like this video. You can also give us extra support by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.